By deeds, vision and righteousness, by virtue, the sublime life. By these are mortals purified, and not by lineage and wealth. He who is possessed of constant virtue, has understanding and is concentrated, is strenuous and diligent as well, will cross the flood so difficult to cross and overcome the suffering. By deeds, wisdom and righteousness, by virtue, sublime life. We live a peaceful life of harmlessness. That is very important. Try not to harm. Try to keep the precepts, because it helps in our meditation. And at the same time, when we meditate, it makes our precepts strong. So we meditate, become more aware of our mind, and become more mindful that we don't harm not only humans, but we don't harm the lesser beings as well. In the first of the traits, the unvirtuous he cultivates, he visits not the virtuous, and in his ignorance he sees no fault in a transgression there. The wrong thoughts often in his mind, his faculties, he will not guide. Virtue in such a constitution comes to partake of diminution. Now in this chapter on virtues, the unvirtuous he cultivates. He do all the wrong things. He visits not the virtuous. He doesn't want to learn. Doesn't want to follow good teachings. And of course, in his ignorance, he sees no fault. He thinks there is nothing wrong. He thinks he's a good man. He thinks there's nothing wrong. With wrong thoughts in his mind, and he doesn't guard his faculties, do what he likes, never control his mind. Virtue in such a constitution, when they talk about precepts, partakes of diminution. There's no precepts in that person, no virtues. But he whose mind is satisfied with virtue that he has achieved, never thinks to stir himself and take a meditation subject, contented with mere virtuousness, nor striving for a higher stage. His virtue bears the appellation of that partaking of stagnation. There are only those who believe in precepts, but he doesn't meditate. He thinks that is enough. He thinks that I keep my precepts well, I have virtue, so that's enough. Meditation is too difficult. Well, maybe not time yet. So these virtues, says the scripture, partaking of stagnation. He doesn't go further than that. His virtue is only 5 precepts, or 8 precepts, or 10 precepts. But it doesn't go further. The virtue is the virtues of precepts, not the virtue of the mind, or the purity of the mind. When you meditate, you develop purity of the mind. So his virtue is more on the body, not to kill, not to steal, not to tell lies, no sexual misconduct, no intoxication. So it's more on guarding the body. So that is the second degree of virtue, the virtue of stagnation. But who possess of virtue strive with concentration for his aim, their bhikkhu's virtue in its function is called partaking of distinction. Now the Buddha says, "O monks, keeping precept well, but you need to meditate. You need to develop your mental virtue. It's called the partaking of distinction. distinction. It's better. It's better. The third one is better than the second one. Of course, second one is better than the first one. No virtue. Who finds mere virtue not enough, but has this passion for his goal, his virtue through such aspiration comes to partake penetration. Now this is the best one. We practice virtues, we practice concentration, we practice wisdom. What is this wisdom? But has this passion for his goal. We practice this passion, detachment. That's what we do. Every time we watch this air element rising and falling, our mind partake of detachment. We are not attached to this air element. Every time we note the body consciousness, whether it is numbness, it is pain, whether it is light or heavy, whether it has coolness or heat. We are not attached to it. We just note it. Now this is heaviness. Now this is lightness. Now this is painful. Now this is itchy. Now this is numbness. So what do? This passion for his goal. So what? Partaking, but has this passion for his goal. We practice knowing, detachment for his goal. So, his virtue through such aspiration comes to partake of penetration. So you keep doing that. You start with vision, start with virtue, you end with enlightenment. That's what the scripture says. So in this Visuddhimagga, so these are discoursed by the Buddha, various type of people in this world. There are those who don't practice virtue at all. So they do not know when passing away where they are going. Sometimes they are going near, sometimes they are going middle, sometimes they are going far away, born in the lower world. Then they encounter more suffering and more pain. But there are those who are just contented with virtues. But this is good. The 5 precepts. Buddha says, you are sure of the Deva world. That's what the Buddha says in his discourse to the lay as well to the monks. That if we just by keeping virtue, just by keeping precepts, develop mindfulness of precepts, we are assured of the heavenly world. You are assured. But when you do dana, giving, you are not assured. But if you keep sila, you are assured of the Deva world. But if you practice not only virtue, but with concentration, that is distinction. That is good, fantastic, right? Because you have virtue plus concentration. You have purity of mind, purity of consciousness, of mind. Mind becomes pure. Because every time you practice concentration, put your mind to the rising and falling, put your mind into one point, defilements cannot arise in your mind. There's no greed, hatred, delusion. There's no anger, frustration, sadness. There's no fear. They cannot arise in your mind because the mind arises with the object one at a time. They cannot arise as 2 objects at the same time. They cannot. Just as when you seeing consciousness arises, hearing consciousness cannot arise. Neither do tasting consciousness arises when there is this body consciousness arises. No, they arise, they pass away. Another consciousness arises and pass away. They go into mental formation, go into the thinking by way of seeing. Then they pass away. It goes into the other vijnana consciousness by way of hearing and goes into the mental formation. Ting, 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 then pass away, then it goes to body formation. Then you say, okay, I'm feeling a bit numb, I'm feeling a bit pain. Then it arises, it passes away, then you come to seeing and hearing again. You can't have two objects arising at the same moment. No, because that is the citta niyama. Nobody controls it. It is merely the phenomena of the mind. It is like that. You can't ask the question, why is it like that? Because it is like that. Because that's the nature of how the mind works. It is like that. So things are like that. Just as karma is like that. If you do something wholesome, you'll get happiness, merit. If you do something unwholesome, you are going to suffer pain. Because that is like that. You don't ask why. It is like that. Because it is Dhamma. It is Dhamma. It is reality. It is like that. So when we talk about virtues, then we talk about the virtues of the precepts, virtues of the mind, mind purity. And then we talk about the virtues of wisdom. We have the virtues of by taking precepts. Then we have the purity of the mind. Then we have the purity of the views. And that will be the wisdom. Concentration is the purity of the mind. It becomes very pure. But then in the practice of vipassana, inside meditation, then you have the purity of views. See things as they are. So therefore, wisdom cancel, destroy wrong views. So we have the purity of the views. Alright? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.